title on the board. Our title says, what is a rhombus? And we're talking about a shape that we maybe have heard about, maybe have seen. But today we're going to be learning the attributes or rules of being a rhombus. Do not stick tissues in your classwork folder. That's weird. What's up, Colby? I will tell you that a rhombus is a quadrilateral. So what does that mean? What rules must it follow if it is a quadrilateral? Jalen? It has to have 4 corners. What else do we know about a quadrilateral? A rhombus is a quadrilateral. I'm writing, you're writing. Macklin? We're missing one keyword in there. Nope. Macklin's missing one word in there. Madison? For straight sides. Can't have those crazy wavy sides. Anything else? What else is a rule of a quadrilateral? What else is a rule of a quadrilateral? Because a rhombus follows the rules of a quadrilateral. Huxley? It's closed. I don't know why you're drawing and not writing. It's a laugh because you know better. A rhombus is also a parallelogram. So what other rule must it follow? A rhombus is also a parallelogram. So what other rule does it have to also have? I like that I see some people are looking back in their notebook. We're just sitting there hoping the answer is going to show up on Miss Miller's face. Rylan? It has to have 2 sets or pairs of parallel sides. Remember, parallel means that the opposite sides, if they keep going, will never ever touch. They're the same distance apart. Mackenzie, what's up? No, that's not a rule of a parallelogram. So far, these are all the rules for a parallelogram. There's one more rule that makes a rhombus special. All sides are equal length. All sides are equal length. What's that? Hi.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That some of you have seen, especially if you've been working in freckle. It's probably not a word that you're really going to see a lot in 3rd grade. You will definitely start to see it in 4th grade, but I want to make you aware. So typically when we talk about equal, right? We talk about things having the same value, meaning they could look different, but have the same worth, right?
Yes.
So when we start playing with geometry and shapes, our version of equal changes a little bit. So you're going to see a word. Some of you have already seen it because you've already asked me. That looks like this. Congruent.
Yes. What does symbol mean?
Congruent. It's a star. Please write it. Congruent. Yes, you were writing this. You may or may not really see this. You might see it a little bit on I Ready or Freckle. It's not really something we talk about a lot in 3rd grade, but is absolutely something you're going to talk about in 4th grade. Congruent is a little different than equal. Equal, we know, can look different, but has the same worth. Congruent means exactly the same. Exactly the same. So if I say these two things are congruent, I mean they are exactly the same. Is there a reason you are not writing? I already passed 3rd grade once. Evelyn?
Wait, so if you said identical twins are congruent?
No, because they are not exactly the same. Yes.
So a square sides are congruent?
Correct, because they are all exactly the same length. If I picked them up, I could rearrange them and it would all be exactly the same. Yes.
Are triangles congruent?
They can be.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
There is a thing called a congruent triangle where all the sides are the same length. Looks like this.
Wait, I like a clue.
What?
One on a triangle, it looks like this, and the triangle, it looks like this.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, but it can be. So I want to make you aware of that word because you might see it when we're talking about shapes that have equal length. Does this shape have any rules about corners?
No.
Just that it has to have them. Does it have to have special corners? Stop talking over me. Can it?
Yes.
Sure. It could have square corners. We talked about that, but it doesn't have to. These are the rules to being a rhombus. So far, so good? Okay, so let's draw some examples. Maybe. So the first example is going to look very similar to a parallelogram. So I start with my top and my bottom sides. It's very hard to make them equal length, I know. Try your best. That's as good as I got. That shape, if I go through my rules, it's closed. It has 4 straight sides, has 4 corners, and it has all equal sides and 2 sets of parallel sides. I can call that shape a rhombus. John, you need to have all these words down in that notebook. Try to make it equal because that is an important rule. Okay. Is this a rhombus? Ooh, I have not drawn anything. What you mean, yes? Let's go through the rules. Does it have 4 corners?
Yes.
Yes. Does it have 4 straight sides?
Yes.
Is it closed?
Yes.
Does it have 2 sets of parallel lines?
Yes.
Show me, where are they?
Why doesn't it have one set here?
We should have side and side, top and bottom. Does it have all equal length sides?
Yes.
Does it have another name?
Yes.
What else could I call that shape? Zach? Sure. It's not going to be the name of a shape. That's just a describing word. What could I call that shape though? Like, what could another name for that shape be, Mackenzie? I could call that shape a parallelogram, not wrong. Gio?
Rectangle?
I could call that shape a rectangle. It has all the rules of a rectangle. It is a rectangle. No, it's not a but. Look at your rules of a rectangle. The rules of a rectangle are 4 square corners, 2 sets of parallel sides, 4 straight sides closed. That's a rectangle. That's not a rule of a rectangle. Kenzie, what else could I call that shape? I could call that shape a square. Heidi, what else could I call that shape? I could call it a quadrilateral. Kato, what else could I call that shape? Polygon. Alright, we're going to watch a short video on a rhombus just to go over those rules again.
We are workers assigned to the rhombus rack at the polygon factory. How do we determine if a shape belongs on the rack at the factory? In this lesson, you will learn how to identify a rhombus by its attributes. Let's review what we know. A quadrilateral is a polygon with 4 sides and 4 angles. You'll notice that all 3 of these shapes are quadrilaterals with 4 sides and 4 angles. Some quadrilaterals also have parallel lines. Parallel lines are 2 lines that will always be the same distance apart. They could go on and on forever and never cross or become farther apart. In our example of a bookshelf, we see 1 pair of parallel lines and a second pair of parallel lines. When looking for a rhombus, we can also examine the angles. Angles are created when 2 line segments meet together at a common point. In this example, we see 4 angles. How can we organize this information to identify rhombuses for the rack? We use attributes to help us get organized. Attributes are categories we use to describe objects. In this picture, we see these foods are in the fruit group. These foods are in the vegetable group, while these belong in the dairy group. To round up rhombi for the rack at the polygon factory, what attribute should we be looking for? Inspectors of the rhombi rack look for 3 attributes. One attribute is 4 congruent or equal sides. Another attribute is that opposite sides are parallel. And the final attribute of a rhombus is that opposite angles are equal. Let's examine each of these attributes closer. A rhombus has 4 congruent sides. This shape.
The plural of rhombus is rhombi. Sometimes when you have a word that ends in an S that you need to make plural, meaning more than one, you don't just add another S. Rhombus is, no. You just change it to an I. So rhombi.
Oh, just a die? Like dice?
No, because that's not ending in an S. And that's also the singular version, not the plural.
Shape, we see that each side is equal. A rhombus has opposite sides. These sides are parallel to each other. In this shape, we see 1 pair of parallel sides with the blue arrows, and a second pair of parallel sides marked by the green arrows. Well, what is our final attribute? A rhombus has 4 angles. The opposite angles are equal. In this example, we see that the angle formed at the top of the shape is equal to the angle at the bottom of the shape. And the 2 angles that are opposite each other on the sides are also equal. Let's examine some shapes using these 3 attributes. Would the yellow shape belong on the rhombi rack at the polygon factory? Let's examine this shape. What was our first attribute? Do we have 4 congruent sides? We can see that we do not. This shape does not belong. The light-colored rhombus in the background confirms our thinking. Would this shape belong on the rhombi rack at the factory? Let's think about those three attributes. Our first was 4 congruent sides. We can see they are. How about opposite sides parallel? They are. And finally, are opposite angles equal? We can see they are. This shape has all three attributes and belongs on the rhombi rack. Let's inspect these shapes. Would they belong on the rhombi rack at the factory? Do you have those attributes in your head? Let's take a look at our first shape. 4 congruent sides. They are 2 sets of parallel lines. There's one pair, there's a second pair. Yes. How about opposite angles are equal? They are equal. This shape belongs on the rack because it has all three attributes of a rhombus. Now for this shape. 4 congruent sides. Can you see that the sides are not equal? This shape doesn't belong on the rack because it doesn't have all three attributes. And our final shape. What's that first attribute? 4 congruent sides. We can see that the sides of this shape are not all equal. This can't be a rhombus. It doesn't belong on the rack. In this lesson, you learned how to identify a rhombus by its attributes.
Our title is Quadrilateral Family, and you can put a box around it. Quadrilateral Family. I need you to write, please. Thank you. So we're going to organize these quadrilaterals that we've been learning about, almost like a family tree. So the first shape that we learned about that only had one more extra rule beyond a quadrilateral was what shape? What shape only has one more rule outside of the rules of quadrilateral? Evelyn? You could be looking at Evelyn is not helping you answer that question. You have a notebook also. Zach? No, rhombus has lots of rules. Colby? Which is what shape? Yeah, we had a parallelogram. So on one side, we're going to come over here, and we had a parallelogram. Does it have the rules of a quadrilateral?
Some.
Not some, not most. It has all the rules of a quadrilateral. It just has extra rules, like 2 sets of parallel lines.
So it has every
Now we had one shape that only had one set of parallel lines. What was that shape? What shape only had one set of parallel lines? It's not a parallelogram because it doesn't have 2 sets. It only has 1 set. Looking at the board and hoping the answer appears doesn't solve your problem. You wrote this down. That's why we wrote it down. Yeah? A trapezoid. So if you are a quadrilateral and you add some parallel lines, you could either become a trapezoid or a parallelogram. Those are your 2 options. Think of it like parents And they're 2 kids. So far, so good. Now, trapezoid, there's not really anything else. But parallelogram, I can add some special rules. What happens to a parallelogram when I add the rules of square corners? What shape does it turn into? If I have a parallelogram that now has square corners, what shape is that now? I am at a parallelogram and I'm now adding square corners. What shape is that now? Jalen?
Square.
Nope. Keegan? A rectangle. So I could be a special parallelogram with square corners, and you would call me a rectangle. No. Now parallelogram had another kid. This kid didn't have to have square corners, but it did have to have all equal sides. What shape is a parallelogram that also has all equal sides? I'm not saying anything about the corners. Now, so your hair is not helping you get to 4th grade. A parallelogram that also has all equal sides. Colby? A rhombus. We just learned about that. Now there is one more very special shape that is a quadrilateral and a parallelogram and a rectangle and a rhombus. What shape is all of those shapes also? It has the same rules of a quadrilateral, the same rules of a parallelogram, the same rules as a rectangle, the same rules as a rhombus. It's the shape with the most rules. Not a trick question. I should see more hands. That a square. A square.
What? A square earlier. The rhombus, I think, the triangular,
Nope. Can a trapezoid be a square?
Yeah. Yes. No. 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 Yes. No, it can't. No, it can't.
It doesn't have square corners. It doesn't have equal sides, and it only has one pair of parallel lines, or sets of parallel lines. So a trapezoid can never also be a square.
Yeah, it looks like this. Wait, this is that little top. So a square can be a square can be strongest in a rectangle, but opposite in a rectangle can't be square.
All squares can be called a rhombus and a rectangle, but not all rhombus and not all rectangles can be called squares.
So that means they're a special shape.
Mm-hmm. Evelyn?
Is the square the most special shape or are there more shapes you have?
In the quadrilateral family, so out of all quadrilaterals, the square is the most special. It's got the most rules, the most attributes. So far, so good?
Yes.
We understand how they're related?
No.
Are all quadrilaterals squares?
No.
No. Are all squares quadrilaterals?
Yes.
So tricky.
Wait.
Are all rectangles squares?
No.
Are all squares rectangles?
Yes.
So tricky. Are all quadrilaterals trapezoids?
Yes.
No. Are all trapezoids quadrilaterals?
Yes.
So tricky. So tricky. All right, we're going to stop here.